Hi there. In this video, we're going to go over how to set up a CI/CD pipeline to automate your deployment or your development, your deployment, and your build of your database project for your Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool code. In order for this to work, you need to have an Azure DevOps project set up. You need to have set up your service connections, and obviously you need to have a Synapse Analytics pool database deployed in a Synapse Analytics workspace. So let's get started. The first thing you need to do is obviously create a repository and connect your Visual Studio 2019 to that repository. So here I have a Synapse Analytics SQL pool project connected to my Visual Studio solution. If we look in Visual Studio, we can see that we have a few objects in here. We've got an external table. We have a few other tables. I've got a DB version table where I have my deployment pipeline information set up. I've got some other auxiliary tables just created for testing. I also have other things set up. For instance, I have the external data source for my primary file system, and then here you can see that connects to a container called primary FS, and then I have parameterized the storage account name, and I'm going to show how these parameters are managed. Bottom line is this is a fairly blank database project, but it's got some items in it that can illustrate how things are set up. The first thing I want to touch on is parameterization. So I have a couple of things that I want to manage. The one thing I want to manage is this parameter here. The other thing I have is in a post-deployment script, I have a workspace, a primary workspace name. So I want to make sure that I always have the workspace user set up or created on this in this database. The other thing I do is here I have the build version. So this is just a parameter that I put in, but this allows me to control this during deployment or in post deployment. Cool. So that's the first thing. The next thing is the parameters needs to be managed. So if we go into properties and yeah, I guess that the first target platform we set up is this target platform. This is the one used for Synapse pools. If we go into the SQL command variables, here we can see a few variables and there's some defaults set up here. These are the ones that we're going to control during deployment. So the first thing is first, we obviously have, I've checked this code in and it's up and running. There's something I'm going to need to do or generate. So I'm going to need to generate these publishing profiles. So I have one for my development and one for my production. And these publishing profiles, they contain the general deployment or the deployment variables, the SQL command variables. So you can see I have my build version variable, I have my default storage account variable, and my workspace MSI variable that control these different values. And you can see that there's this is for development. If I open up the production, and we're going to open that with the XML editor, you can see that this one has the prod variables. So this controls, these are set up for a specific target environment. So the first thing you need to do once you've checked in your code or once you've developed your code, you need to generate these files. Simplest way to do that, and they need to be generated for that specific deployment. So you click Publish, and once you get into Publish, you go ahead and load your default values, and then you click here, Create Profile. when you, sorry, yeah, I've got the save dialog somewhere else. Just hold on. Sorry, you say save profile as. Sorry, my bad. When you get this, it's going to ask you to push out the deployment code somewhere, and you can save it directly underneath your project directory. I'm going to hit cancel. I'm going to hit cancel here. Once you've done that, you go ahead and you check in the code, and you should all be good. Before I make any changes here in checking code, I'm just going to quickly walk over the build pipeline and the deployment or release pipeline that I've set up. So if we click on pipelines, there we go. And if we click into this build pipeline, our SQL pool build pipeline, I'm going to go ahead and click edit. And there's 3 steps involved here. So first of all, one thing that you always want to make sure that you're building using the correct agent. I found the default agent that they like to use is the uh, uh, Visual Studio 2017 profile. So you need to just say Windows 2019, and that's the agent you want to run. So there are 3 steps. First step is to build the actual solution. So this is a normal Visual Studio desktop application build. And it's straightforward. You browse through to the solution, to the solution file in your repository, and that's all you have to do here. The next step is you want to copy for me, I want to copy the XML file into my build local repository path. So these are the XML files that we have in our source repo that we just created, those published files, because I need those available during the release pipeline. So I just put them into this variable link here under my project, and I push them into the debug folder. The debug folder is the same folder that's going to contain uh, the DACPack files. The final step will be to publish these artifacts. So I take that whole debug output folder and I put that into a, a, a pipeline artifact called SQL pool. Cool. Also for a trigger, so I've triggered this to enable continuous integration on the main branch. So every time that someone commits, it's going to go and rebuild this um, or fire this pipeline. Cool. The release pipeline, so let me step through to that one here. We're going to edit this one. The release pipeline is triggered on that SQL pool build activity. So once the artifacts are published, it's triggered on that. I've enabled, as you can see, there's a tick box there, so I've enabled it. And there are 2 tasks in here. First task is to connect to my Azure Key Vault. Now this Key Vault is using your scope credentials in your service connector that you've set up under project settings. And I connect that to a Key Vault that's located under, you can see this is under a demo resource group. So the Key Vault is sitting under there. And I've wanted to get the SQL admin user password. So I've just call that secret by name. And what's interesting is that this secret is now available here as a parameter. So some basic connection string stuff here. This is not really tricky. This is an Azure SQL DAC task or Azure SQL data warehouse deployment task. Um, uh, we basically tell we want to use the ARM as a connection type. We give the credential or the credentials for it. It's going to run the ARM activities. And then for the data warehouse, we then give some uh, basic settings, so SQL authentication, the host name, the database, our target deployment database name. So this is our SQL pool, our dedicated SQL pool name. We give a username, and we then pass in the variable from that's going to be the actual password in the Key Vault secret. And then we choose our SQL DAC file as a deployment type, and the action is going to be publish. Now, publish is going to run an incremental deployment, so you can run this for continuous integration. And then we browse to our build artifacts to our DAC file. And then we give it, and you can see here, for this specific, this is my development environment, so I'll then pass in the dev publish pipeline. Now, if you remember, I had that build version variable inside of that one post deployment script where I inserted that into a table. So I then grab the build source version and I set that variable here. Now, by doing that, I can, obviously correlate to a deployment log and sort of trace back the steps to find out where my latest build is. Cool, and that's it. That's once this has been set up, um, anything that um, we commit into source control is going to be created in our database. So let's take a quick look at this database. So I have I've got 3 tables and not so much. So let's just create another uh, table here. So we're gonna go ahead and just go add new item. Oh wow, we're gonna say new table. We're gonna call this, sorry, once table is here. So this is my CICD table. Yeah, demo. Just need an artifact then. So we go ahead and say add, and now my Visual Studio goes on the blink. So I just need to minimize that, maximize that, drag it to the right screen, and we should be able to see some code. There you go. So yeah, super interesting default code. Yep, and this is all we're gonna have. I'm gonna go ahead and save this, close it, save all, and we're gonna go into my Git changes. I'm gonna do commit, test, CICD demo. We're gonna go and commit all, and we're gonna push that to main. There you go. Cool, and that has now started and should be finished soon. And we're done. Right. So now if we go back to our pipelines and we have a quick look at the build pipelines, they should be running. So there you go. Started 10 seconds ago. This takes roughly about 40 seconds, I think. So we can step into this build pipeline and yep, step into the latest build and have a look at the there we go. So that's busy running and it's just completed its build and it's busy doing its sort of post-mortem stuff. Cool. And we're good. Right, you can see publish new artifact, all good. So now if we go into our release pipeline, that one should be kicking off now. And you can see, there you go. It's busy running. So step into this release. You can see it's busy queued. You can go and look at the logs. And here we go. We're busy initializing the job. We grabbed well, we're downloading our artifact. It's downloaded. There we go, we grabbed the key vault and we're busy running our deployment script. And you can see here it's, right, not there, I was a bit too zealous there. But you can see it's passing in credentials. It's using the publish file and we should have an override variable. Here we go. You can see our variables build version. So this was our build ID, and it's busy deploying. And let's just remember 08C22 because we're going to check that in our table once it's done. And you can see it creating tables, so it's running an incremental. So it created that table. You could see it there in the log. So now if it's done, if we go back and you can see under tables, we don't have that CICD Demo. So we go here and we refresh tables. And there we go. There it is. I don't remember the log or the version, but if we go select top 1000 from the DB version table, we should have an entry that corresponds with just now. We can go and validate the log output just now. Where is it? There you go. There's our deployment entry. So it was 08C22 and that just deployed there. So if we go back here and we go into that one, and hopefully we get the data back. There you go. And where is our variable? Ah, that's interesting. I don't see the variable override. Hmm. Looks like it omitted that from the log once that was completed, unless it was in the previous task, but I don't think so. Huh, interesting. I never noticed that before. Okay. Anyway, oh wait, sorry. It didn't. It doesn't wrap text. So there's our build version override. Yep, so it was 08C22, so it's the same one. Yep, so we can validate that the database has been updated and that everything worked fine. So following a pattern like this, you're able to work sort of code first and then continuously deploy your changes. And not obviously you can have this as a gate for your next production deployment. So in other words, in your release pipeline, you could create a post-release condition for someone to validate. Yeah, so create a test task or a unit testing task, for instance, for someone in the project in the current sprint to test the release. And then once they close that task, you could then have that as a gate for a second stage to release into your production environment. We will hopefully come back to those scenarios in a future video. Anyway, I hope that you've learned something today, and I will see you next time. Cheers.